Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everyone and such a great turnout. Thank you so much for attending today. My name is Catherine Himmelfarb-Borden, and I'm the owner of the Forest Hill Real Estate Yorkville office. On behalf of my co-hosts, Michael Callis, Darren Slavens, and Jeremy Pilarski, it is a privilege, and I thank you for joining us. I know that I speak for each of them, and perhaps all of you, when I say that the events, the tremendous weight of the events of October 7th, have obviously confused us, weighed heavily on us, not only as realtors, but as human beings. And I thank UJA for gathering together these experts to help us navigate this unknown terrain as we all grapple with how to act, react, stay safe, and manage in these times. Our three wonderful speakers will, I'm sure, offer meaningful guidance and address your particular questions and concerns. But most importantly, today we have gathered together as a community, and we will hopefully be able to support one another ongoing and shed light on how to protect ourselves, our brokerages, and make sense of what was, previously completely unknown to us. So I'm going to pass it on to Darren now. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Darren Slavens from Slavens and Associates. As an industry, we're feeling and we're seeing the effects of anti-Semitism in our daily life, personally and professionally. Over the past weeks, many of us have dealt with this hatred, whether in print, online, in person. We're also experiencing feelings of vulnerability when showing homes or interacting with a client that might not be Jewish or from the Jewish community. Our individual brokerages have also had to combat anti-Semitism from within our realtor family. And we know it hasn't been easy for many of you. Today, we come together through various conversations, which finally led to outreach from UJA asking how they could help us. While a few of us gave UJA feedback in order to frame the discussion, today you will have the opportunity to have your questions answered. We hope you will not only understand the resources available to you, but also inform our UJA professionals what is still required for us to feel safe in our work environment. I would now like to introduce our first speaker, Joanna Novus, Director, Community Mobilization to Combat Anti-Semitism. On May 21st, 2021, following a sorry, I guess that should be November 2021, following attacks in Israel, UJA embarked on initiatives to combat anti-Semitism and to mobilize the community. Joanna is a large part of that initiative, and we are thrilled that she is joining us this morning. Joanna, over to you.
Thank you, Darren. Nice to see you all. I feel like there's celebrities here. I recognize your names from seeing you around the city, so it's incredible. I know you're all going through a hard time. I speak to people in lots of different sectors every day who are going through a hard time. You're not alone, and I kind of liken it to COVID, the amount that our paradigm has shifted and the amount that our lives have changed since October 7th. And it's sort of just within the Jewish community that I know it, where our lives have changed so dramatically. And so I can identify with that. And I'm sure you can all identify with that. So I want to just step back a little bit and talk about anti-Semitism. We all know what it is. We all know how it feels. But I think it's important we step back just for a moment and look at sort of the history and the different types of anti-Semitism that exist, so we can really understand what we're dealing with. So there's religious anti-Semitism, which is like Jews killed Jesus, blood libel, things that have existed for a very, very long time. Then there's racial anti-Semitism. What Nazi Germany used is that we cannot convert away from being Jewish. We are Jewish in our blood, and we are seen as an inferior race when we talk about racial anti-Semitism. There's Holocaust denial, which of course is a form of anti-Semitism, denying the scope, the severity. There's political anti-Semitism, which means Jews seek world domination. And then finally, there's erasive anti-Semitism, which is what we're seeing a lot of right now. And that sort of comes from the left. That comes from the Jewish experience of being a marginalized community or having any history of oppression being erased. And that is categorically false. We all have our own family history where that would completely differ. So anti-Semitism continues to evolve. It adapts to different sectors, and it's affected realtors in its own specific way. Another way to think about anti-Semitism is anti-Jewish racism. So this isn't just about hate crimes. This is also about attitudes, behaviors, discriminatory behavior, bigotry. It doesn't have to be a huge incident for it to be anti-Semitism. It's smaller, it takes so many different forms. So we have a tool, it's called the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. That's the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism. It's widely adopted. It's been adopted by our Canadian federal government. And I would encourage you to have a look at it online after, so you can familiarize yourself with it. Now, the actual definition is a little bit vague. It's a little bit broad, but where the power of the definition comes in is in the examples that it provides. So I just wanted to give you two examples here of what those are, so you can understand when what you're feeling crosses into anti-Semitism in terms of what is federally adopted. So one of those examples is accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoings committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews. So saying things like Jews committed 9/11, or Jews invented COVID, Jews did that for profit, for vaccination profit. All of these things are anti-Semitic, and it's clearly defined within that definition of the IRA definition. Another one, which is pertinent right now, is holding Jews collectively responsible for actions of the state of Israel. That is anti-Semitic. To target businesses downtown because of a conflict in the Middle East that are Jewish owned, that is anti-Semitic. It's clear. It's very clear. And you know that it's rising. We feel it, but it's also it's anecdotal, but it's also fact-based. We have hate crime statistics, and I think my my colleague Inspector Rinkoff will speak about that a little bit later. So, as Darren mentioned, since May 2021, when there was an outbreak of violence in Israel, and we started to feel the effects of anti-Semitism here, we developed a strategy, and that is based on sort of 4 principles: uniting our community. If you were in Ottawa on Monday, I hope you felt united. I felt united and cold, but united. Changing the public policy landscape, and we do that largely through our partners at CJA, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. The other 2 components are shifting opinion, shifting public opinion, which we work at every single day through education and through different realms of that education. And finally, community mobilization, which is where a lot of my work comes in. And that works with working in workplaces, with allies, on social media, with influencers, at rallies, of course, and working groups, which is what this is, which is people working in the same industry and having the same challenges. So we've talked about the IRA definition. So I'd like you to familiarize yourself with that. Sorry, my light went out. The other things that you can do a little closer to home are know your work policies, know your code of conduct, know your social media policy. These are your rights. These are your responsibilities. So familiarize with them, yourself with them, not only for your own good, but when you are able to understand when somebody crosses a line, then you'll know that they've crossed that line. So you should be able to report it. And speaking with Catherine and Michael and Darren and Jeremy before this began, I understand TREB is the right way to report complaints if it's realtor to realtor. So I would encourage you to document everything that you can, screenshot, make note of it, make note of the date, so you keep track of it. If TREB is not the right governing body, I understand there's RICO as well, which helps the public with complaints that they're dealing with. So you could go that route too, depending on the type of complaint. I will also say that the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs has a legal task force. So should you need legal support, they're doing that pro bono, and they'll even they'll talk to you even to understand whether your complaint meets a threshold for any legal action. So it doesn't need to be at a high level. You can also just get some advice if you need. Beyond that, there's reporting mechanisms through, if it's an emergency, you call the police. If it's a non-emergency, you call their non-emergency police line, and then you report it to UJA as well, where we have our reporting platform to be able to keep track of all of this information. The other couple of things I wanted to say was just about considering the ways that you organize. Now, working in different sectors, I get to see the way people are organizing. So healthcare have their own way of organizing, and I'm talking about Jewish professionals organizing within that profession. So Jewish doctors, Jewish nurses, anybody in the healthcare, they're organizing in their own specific way. Some of those have to do by institution, and some of them are broader across the network. They're forming Jewish affinity groups, so within their own place of work, so that they have Jewish colleagues, so that they can garner support. But they also have a united voice for leadership. And leadership then has a way to have a voice, to have a hand on the pulse of what's happening in the Jewish community for their Jewish professionals. So I hope that this conversation will start to consider ways that you organize so that Jewish realtors have a voice and a way to advocate for themselves, both for their safety and for the good of all folks that they're working with, all colleagues. So with that, I hope I've given you some good information, and I'd like to introduce my colleague, UJA's Chief Development Officer, Sarah Lefton.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Joanna, and thank you everyone on this call. I don't think I've seen a group of realtors from the Jewish community as big as this one. And so I'm just really grateful that you've all taken the time to join us today. And thank you to Joanna. I know that you've been sharing sort of some of the work that we're doing in this space. This has been a really, really challenging time for our community and our community around the world. I will say I had a Zoom call last night, interestingly, with some of my colleagues from other cities, Melbourne, Johannesburg, New York, like other communities, and to watch sort of, I wish we were united by something else, not this, but to watch how all of our communities are processing this is really an interesting thing and a scary thing, because Jews around the world are all feeling threatened and are all feeling that right now we're not feeling safe and secure in our own communities. And so being able to share those experiences is also has been something very interesting through this process. I want to speak just for a couple of minutes about UJA, our role in the community and all of this, and how you might be able to get involved. Joanna, you touched on that as well, how to get involved, or do you want a little bit? I'll cover that. Okay. So I think, first of all, I want to thank so many of you who are not just with us now, but who have been with us year over year over year. I think you all know that there is a federation like ours in every Jewish community in the world where there are more than 1,000 Jews. This is how we as Jewish communities organize around the world. So there is a federation in every Jewish community around the world where there are more than 1,000 Jews. That federation, and ours in Toronto, UJA, is accountable for the overall health of the Jewish community. And what that means is whatever our Jewish community needs in that moment, that is for the federation to provide. And so really quickly, if I talked about 100 years ago, it was about helping with immigration. It could be helping with, providing social services to members of our community in different times. It could be setting up day schools when Jews were first coming here. It could be dealing with assimilation and making sure that Jewish identity stays strong. If you look at things like March of the Living and Birthright and PJ Library, all those programs were born out of a need to make sure that we had a way for Jewish people to affiliate. But essentially, at the end of the day, our community is funded through something called the UJA annual campaign. And this is the way that all federations around the world organize, the way that Jewish communities are funded around the world. There is one big campaign, and I think so many of you are already supporting this annual campaign, but essentially we start at zero every year. Last year, we hit $65 million just in Toronto alone. And that essentially funds the operating budget for our community. Everything from Jewish family and child to day school subsidies, to security, to our support of Israel, March of the Living, Birthright, Hillel, all of those things, mental health supports, addiction supports and counseling, all of those things are funded through the annual campaign. That annual campaign funds, as I said, the operating budget for the community. And so when you get those calls from UJA or a friend calling and saying, please contribute, that's what we're asking you to contribute to. And I bring that up just because we never get a group of Jewish realtors like this on. I know so many people are supporting the campaign, but others just don't even know how it differentiates from like any other Jewish charity. And the truth is, we don't run in conflict with other Jewish charities. We are there to support them. We fund 100 other Jewish organizations in the city alone, let alone what we're doing in Israel and overseas, helping vulnerable Jewish populations. So that's the annual campaign. I'll give you the real facts just quickly. It used to be, if you look at your parents, your grandparents, every member of the Jewish community paid into the campaign, even if it was $1, even if it was $18, everyone did. Today, it's not the case. I think there are so many people who don't recognize that this community, cannot function unless members of the Jewish community will contribute. And so that's something that we're dealing with right now, going down to, probably at this point about 35,000 people or 40,000 people in total out of 200,000 Jews in Toronto are contributing. But the real truth is that right now, the current reality that you were just hearing about, the fact that we are in crisis, not just in Israel, but there's a war here right now. There is an increase in anti-Semitism. See Paul Rinkoff on the line. There is an increase in hate crimes, which I'm sure he can speak to us about. It is a terrifying time for our community. And so even more important than it's ever been for us to make sure that as a community that we're organized and that we have the resources that we need to do that. And that could be supplementing security in our schools and our synagogues, always in coordination with police. It could be making sure that we have resources to deploy in the fight against anti-Semitism. All of these things are incredibly important. And so we're very much relying on our community to step up, not just with their time, which we need desperately, but also philanthropically, our members of our own community and our allies. And it could be at any level. I see so many of you on this call who are incredible major gift donors. I also see a lot of people who are new, which is amazing. And we need you at any level. So I thank you so much for doing that. We have launched, I will say, an emergency campaign that, again, many of you have been a part of. That emergency campaign at this point has raised more than $70 million just going to Israel. It's 100% of the funds are going to Israel. I think many of you know that funds that we raise in Canada cannot go to any military purpose overseas. So our funds are going directly to the families of victims of terror. Our funds are going directly to PTSD supports and counseling, because what we're watching our Israeli friends and family members go through is beyond anything that any of us could imagine. We are looking at how we've set up families who have had to relocate from border towns, whose families, whose houses, whose livelihoods have been lost completely. How do we set those people up? I think we have to remember that many of the people who lived in those border towns around Gaza, these are not your realtors, so I can talk to you about this. These are not affluent neighborhoods. This is not, the most expensive real estate in Israel. Like, why does someone move to the Gaza envelope? Why do they move around in those towns? I mean, they have family members there, and some of the housing is actually, if you've been to Sderot recently, they have some beautiful housing there. But you're going there because, frankly, it's more affordable than living in the center of the country. And so the families who are subject to this terror and to the relocation are not people who can go check themselves into a fancy hotel and live there for months. These are people who already are struggling financially. And so it's been even more important for our community to support those families as they're relocated, some temporarily and some will be permanent. And so how do we help them? So that's happened through the emergency campaign as well. And last but not least, you hear a lot about protective gear. We know we can't fund protective gear for military in Canada. You cannot do that through a charity, but we can fund protective gear for police, and we can, and other first responders, for paramedics, and for other first responders who are frankly doing incredible work under really, really difficult circumstances. They're doing it under rocket fire. They're doing it with, the risk of being attacked. And they're doing just beyond incredible work, and we need to support them. So that's what we've been doing through the emergency campaign. I mentioned that the emergency campaign, 100% of it goes, there's no overhead, there's no admin fee. But I don't want to end without commenting on just general the annual campaign, which goes to help all of these things: security, our Israel emergency allocations, and anti-Semitism, among all the other work that we're doing in Toronto to support the vulnerable, etc. We believe, and I'm only bringing this up because so many of you are new faces, and I want to share this with you. We are a large organization, but we are very volunteer driven. Our overhead is incredibly low, and while I'm not sure if that's the right way to go, it's certainly what we've committed to. UJA runs primarily through volunteers, and so we have managed to keep our overhead between 10 and 14% forever. And most of you know that charities, generally speaking, run between 25 and 30% in Canada. And it's only because we have hundreds and hundreds of people who are canvassers, volunteer fundraisers, who are doing this work. So I wanted to flag that for you as well. So I'm happy to end here. I'm happy to also take any questions, Allison, or can I take some questions? Is that okay? No? Yes?
We could take a couple questions right now. Let's take a couple questions right now, and then we're gonna move. Jeremy is gonna introduce Paul. So if anyone has a question, they can put it in the chat, or just you can
just take yourself off mute.
Bring yourself off mute.
But happy to answer any questions about our emergency funding, about annual campaign, any of those things. Steve, you look like you're off mute. No? Not by design. Okay.
Wait, I have a quick question, Sarah. So you're saying that all the 100% of the funds go right to the people who need
the Israel emergency. Yeah.
And so how is it distributed, and how quickly does it get to them? And
yeah, it's a great question. So UJA in general, the way that we make all allocations for annual or for the emergency campaign is through, frankly, a really sophisticated process where we have a team of data scientists and researchers who work as part of UJA's planning department. They're the ones who look at the needs. So they're constantly doing research. And again, we have 2 data scientists on the team. They come to us and say locally, there's a huge increase in mental health needs, but it's only between 13 and 17-year-olds. Like, they can give us that information, and they're doing that on the ground in Israel right now. So it's very different than when you give money to a charity that always funds the same thing. So if you give money to a charity that's funding, make it up, a particular healthcare cause or hospital, that might be amazing, but it's not rolling with the needs. Our team is on the ground in Israel, not just since October 7th, but always feeding information to us saying, okay, this week we're seeing a huge increase in this community with this, this particular segment of the community, whatever it is. They're feeding our information to us. The data scientists with the planners, will come to us and bring us that recommendation. And then we have a committee of people like yourselves, volunteers, and it's a good area to get involved if you want, who will study it. They become experts in looking at these different organizations, and they will actually make the decision on the grants that are given out. So we right now have a team of, I think, 16 lay people like you, community volunteers, and they'll look at all the grant requests, they look at the research, and they will determine, okay, right now, you know what, that $1 million doesn't need to go to the hospital. That's something that needs to go to the hospital in a year from now. What they need right now is the protective gear, or what they need today is, a relocation of this 50,000 people down to Eilat, or whatever it is. So they can actually roll with it. That's the benefit of an unrestricted campaign. The money is getting released in waves. We've released over $20 million right now of the 70. We are not releasing all of it immediately, because this is a long-term investment, and we need to make sure that we're supporting Israel in the rebuild and the redevelopment. And so we are distributing strategically over time. Yeah, thanks. Any other questions for now? I'll just say that, Israeli families, thank you. Okay, so the question was, how are we supporting Israeli families that have relocated? So UJA worked with our partner agencies. Remember, we fund the social service agencies in Toronto. So we gathered everyone together, and we literally created one portal for every family that was getting to Toronto would fill out one form instead of going to different agencies. They filled out their information, and they literally would check a box. They have kids that need to be enrolled in schools. They need housing. They need mental health support. They need clothing. Whatever they needed, we did a big intake once instead of having them land and go to all these different people. And then we would basically coordinate services for them. So we've had more than 1,000 people land from Israel in Toronto. We've placed them in day schools, like Jewish day schools, so they have a comfort level with the Hebrew. We've provided free mental health supports, housing where needed, clothing while needed. especially winter clothing, family partnerships if they need play dates for their kids, just to try to adjust. But essentially, UJA's role was to coordinate all the different social service agencies and making sure that we could welcome those 1,000 Israelis in seamlessly. Yeah. And I should also say the JCCs, like we've given them memberships at JCCs. The kids have been put on basketball teams. Like we want to make this a comfortable experience for these families and most importantly, the children who have been completely uprooted. And that I should say, just as a side note, like all that work, that's funded through the annual campaign. So to those of you who are giving to annual campaign, that's part of where the funding is going this year.
There's another question.
Yeah, lone soldiers. So through our Jewish Foundation, we have fund holders who are granting money to lone soldiers. We don't do anything that's connected to military because CRA has very, very strong restrictions against providing any funding from a registered charity in Canada to anything that's connected with military and any foreign military. And so we don't do that, but we definitely have individual donors who are reaching out and doing things that are not charitable with military.
So please continue to put another question. Sarah, you got 2 more questions in the chat. And we're going to take those 2 questions and then
there you go. Where do we find what is needed? It always changes. And so the best thing is I hope you're all getting the UJA emails. We consolidate all the information and send it out. It definitely changes from time to time. You can also reach out to anyone at UJA, any one of the professionals, and we can let you know what's needed. We need help with different things week to week, and it's changing rapidly right now. The kids are only in Jewish day schools for 1 month for free. So we're looking right now. I mean, that's our job right now, is to look and figure out how we're supporting. I don't think it's not 1 month for 3 because a lot of these families have been in for more than 1 month. And then we're working on other every family's different. Some families have the resources to support themselves, and some families don't. And so it's for us to make sure that we are able to circle around those families who require philanthropic support. Other families are coming over and they have the financial resources, but they don't know how to integrate. And so that's where UJA would want to make sure that we're not relying on community resources if a family has financial resources, but doesn't know how to navigate. So we work case by case. Security at the end. Okay, so there's a question which, Paul, I might ask that both of us weigh in on. Why is there so little security at the JCC? Bags are not checked, not inspected. I'm not a security expert, but I can tell you that along with we work closely with police to make sure that what we're doing is meeting a very appropriate threshold of like what is reasonable coming into the JCC. There's security that you can see. There's security that you can't see. And there's both. And so, we're following sort of not just best practice, but best advice on any given day. And you'll see there are moments where there are bag checks. It depends on the day and it depends on the event and all of those things. If someone has a kid in a basketball class and it's obvious the security has seen the parent week over week, there's no need for those kinds of things. But again, we alter our security protocol based on the situation. So I'm going to end here for a minute. And I know we can move through the agenda. I'm going to stay on the call, so I'm happy to take more questions at the end. But Allison, back over to you. Thanks, everybody. Oh, Jeremy, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Sarah. That was great. And just on a personal note, it's been really great for my kids to have some Israeli kids join their classes and to have a real connection to what's going on. So I really love that program. It's really nice. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeremy Pulaski. I'm with Remax Realtron. Just further to what Sarah talked about, the UJA is working closely with the Toronto Police. And I'd like to introduce Paul Rinkoff to talk about community security and as a member of the Toronto Police Services. So welcome, Paul Rinkoff. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Just a thumbs up or yeah, we're good. Okay. So thank you for inviting me today. This is quite a unique audience. Like I think Sarah said, I don't think I've ever spoken to a group of realtors. I have recently spoke to a group of dentists and some doctors, and last night I spoke to a group of community members in 32 Division. We did a town hall in the Clanton Park area, and we spoke to a number of Jewish residents with Councillor Pasternak and answered many of their questions, because there is a lot of concern, tension, anxiety in our Jewish communities, not just in the north area of the city, but across the entire city. And I imagine many of you service across the city, or at least live across the city. So we don't necessarily focus on a specific area. But my name is Paul Rinkoff. I'm an inspector, and I manage the Community Partnership and Engagement Unit. That's my current assignment. And the unit basically strategically manages corporate relationships, community relationships, but at a corporate level. So that's my role here. So we have a number of portfolios here. So corporate level crime prevention. We have our liaison officers that are assigned to different communities. For example, you may not know, we actually have a Jewish community liaison officer that works out of this office, and her job, and not just since October 7th, but every day up till October 7th, she's been on the ground in communities, in Jewish schools, at daycares, at community centers, from elementary to high school, speaking to students, speaking to staff, and really getting a temperature check, dealing with issues that are in the community that relate to community safety. So we have that liaison officer, and she, of course, has been extremely busy since October 7th. The other portfolios we have out of this office are mental health portfolio. So we deal with a lot of mental health at the corporate level across the city for the Toronto Police Service. So I've been a police officer for about 22 years. And I also, one of my roles is I co-chair the Jewish Consultative Committee. And that is a committee made up of a group of community leaders from across the city. And I chair that with a fellow named Michael Levitt. You may know him. He's our community co-chair. And we seek advice from a number of leaders, a number of Jewish leaders in the community. And we also provide information to those leaders because they have a wide reach, just like many of you may have, and are able to provide messages or get information to the community about what the police are doing. Because often what we're doing does go unnoticed. It's not very visible. And so sometimes there's that information gap. So we really rely on our community leaders to get that information out to the community, which is what I'm trying to do today. And so what I'll do is I should add, I happen to be Jewish, and I think one of the advantages of that is myself and some of our other Jewish members have really been able to communicate to our colleagues, to our leadership, especially since October 7th. But I've been in this role for some time. Really, how the conflict, how the war, how the terrorist attacks have impacted the Jewish community and continue to impact the Jewish community. I think today's an eye opener for me, because it lets me pause just for a second though and think how it specifically relates to your profession. So I find that really interesting, and that's something that I may not think of every day, because I'm serving the greater population and not specifically focused on specific business or specific professions. So it's really interesting for me to take a pause and think about how this may impact you in your dealings with your clients and your concerns for your own safety. So thank you again for having me. So I think I'll comment maybe on what my friend Joanna was talking about, and that's the number of hate crimes. And we've seen, and yes, there has been an increase. And I'll just give you a few numbers just to kind of contextualize the increase in hate crime. So we can speak since October 7th. So since October 7th, we've had 78 reported hate crimes in the Toronto Police Service. And to give you some context, let me just turn off my email here because they'll keep coming in. To give you some context, we had about 37 hate crimes in the same period of time. So from October 7th last time. But even more dramatic, I thought I had turned my email off, so they just keep coming. Has been 217 hate motivated graffiti occurrences since October 7th. So that might be a swastika, that might be a hate message towards Jews or other communities. But we're seeing overwhelming hate directed to the Jewish community, but our Muslim communities, our 2S LGBTQS communities, plus communities, are also seeing increases in hate crime. And but we had 19 last year. So quite a dramatic increase. And in year to date, so if you go back to January 1st, we're looking at about 323 reported hate crimes compared to about 224 last year. So I don't have the percentages in front of me. Sometimes when I present the percentages, people want numbers. And sometimes when I present the numbers, people want percentages. So those are the numbers today. But I wanted to just touch on you, being conscious of time, touch on some of the things that we've done as a police service. You might be aware, and that's great, but just in case you haven't, one of the things we've done is because of this increase in the number of hate crimes, we've bolstered up our hate crimes unit. And we had 6 investigators assigned to our hate crimes unit. We now have, since October 7th, 21 investigators. We have 8 special constables, we have analysts and researchers. So we've beefed up our hate crime unit substantially to deal with the increase in volume, but not just at the receiving end. We are laying charges, and you may have noted from media releases last year, we certainly arrested and laid charges at the Indigo event that occurred on November 10th. Just prior to that, there was an incident at a Starbucks, and that probably might resonate with you, because I think that's probably close to a lot of you. So we investigate and lay charges in that. And you know, just to touch on, sometimes there might be frustration on how long it may take the police to arrest and charge, but there's a methodology, and we want to see prosecutions successful in court. So we don't want to skip steps just because there's a lot of pressure to make an arrest or lay a charge. We have to do things properly. Otherwise, we could lose a conviction in court. And so much like your business, you probably want to do things properly, or you might at the end of the day lose a sale. So we don't want to compromise that. So we have to be methodical, but we are laying charges. We are making arrests. The other couple things, you'll note the command posts that we have in the community. We've had them up, and they'll be in the community for the foreseeable future. There are no plans to take the command posts down. That's a commitment from our chief of police, who's, by the way, is very supportive of the Jewish community and all communities across Toronto. And if you have had a chance to go by a command post, I can tell you the community's been very kind to the officers in those command posts. They've been very thankful. They've dropped off lots of food. I think a number of officers have put on a lot of weight since October 7th. So thank you if you have been one of those, but those command posts are there to stay. They're very visible. And the whole idea is it provides accessibility to the community, to all community members, but in particular community members, sometimes Orthodox members who are walking to and from shul, to or from school, or just out and about. It provides a little bit accessibility. It makes people feel safer, and that comes from some of the feedback we've had from the community. So those command posts will stay close in the community, and that really is number one, to make community members feel safer, and also to improve community safety, because we have heightened visibility. And with that is the third thing I want to talk about, is the general heightened visibility that that you have seen in the community. So you've seen more police officers, you've seen more patrols, you've seen officers at Jewish schools, at Jewish community centers, at places of worship. And a lot of them have been at the request of the community. Some of them have been proactive at community events. And we're happy to be able to divert those resources from other areas of our service, which can be challenging in other areas, but we realize where the priority is right now, and that's making our communities feel safe. And so those officers will also be in those areas that I just spoke of for the foreseeable future. There is no plan at this time to reduce that type of initiative or project. So because I get asked that quite a bit. So those are some of the things we've done as a police agency to improve community safety for the Jewish community. There's conduits through your local division, and maybe 32 division, and maybe 13 division, and maybe 53 division, or wherever you live in the city. There are conduits through myself and through other officers that are assigned to this initiative, but just in general. So I'm actually quite proud of the response of the service since October 7th. I've never seen anything like it, but of course, this has been a response to something that I have not seen either. So it's a first in a career. There's been things like this, but nothing to this scale. So that's a little bit about what we've been doing. And then I'm not sure if there's any other speakers, but I'll be happy to answer questions. Again, I'm not an expert in every field, but I certainly can do my best to answer your questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Paul. Really great information, and thanks for being there for not only for the members of the community, but to inform the police force. I think that's great to have you as part of our community and as part of the police. So thanks for that. I'm going to bring back Allison.
Jeremy.
Allison, yes.
Hi, Jeremy. Sorry. I hope.
Oh.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
and I think I actually saw it in the chat too. I just want to ask a question to the officer. Is that cool? Or if not, that's fine. And you can say
I was
that.
just about to say,
Yeah.
I'm going to bring back Allison to open it up for questions, but
Oh, all right.
Absolutely. We'll go through the questions in the chat, but please, Sean, please ask your question and just please direct it to the speaker you want. You want to hear.
This is to the officer Rinkoff. So I know that in Canada here we have freedom of speech, and I'm all for it. And I actually even saw it in the chat too, and it came to my mind. It's things like, you know, from the river to the sea, calling genocide. Like, when does free speech stop and hate speech start? You know, like they seem to be freely doing all this kind of stuff, and you know, it's a little unnerving. So what's the Toronto Police Force? I don't even know if you can answer this question, but what's the company line on this? I'll mute myself.
No, it's a great question. It's asked often. There is no short answer, but I'll give you. I'll try and make a short answer. There's about 4 hate crime offenses in the criminal code, and they have a very high threshold in Canada because of the constitutional right to freedom of speech in Canada. So they have a very high threshold. And because they have a high threshold, what the process is even when we want to investigate somebody for a potential hate crime offense, overwhelmingly, we need the consent of the Minister of the Attorney General. So we'll present our investigation and findings. We'll go to the Minister of the Attorney General, so a Crown Attorney, and they would either consent to laying a charge or not. And that's really the reason for this is applied to the Constitution, because you know, in Canada the right to freedom of speech is held so high that they actually want the ministry to have a look at before charges are laid. There are things that police officers can act right away on. They generally relate to preventing harm, to preventing loss of life, and to preventing damage to property. Immediate, in those cases, immediate, right? So immediate threat to life, harm, and damage to property. So we wouldn't have to get consent for anything related to those charges. So I think that's kind of the short answer. A very high threshold. It's something that our investigators are looking at and reviewing every day. And I know we also have very motivated Crown attorneys that do want to consent to laying charges, but again, that bar and threshold is high. Things like inciting violence, inciting hate, those are criminal offenses. Oftentimes, though, all times they require consent of the Ministry of the Attorney General. So they're ongoing investigations.
May I say something? Paul?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't want to do a speech. My name's Barry Lebo. I'm 56 years in real estate, and I became the Salman Rushdie of real estate. I have been subjected to social media terrorism, and it started 3 years ago. And I don't want to get into this, but it all started on the commemoration of the 6-Day War, when I put a picture on Facebook of saying this, the commemoration of the 6-Day War, and I put a picture of me in uniform when I was in the IDF. And all of a sudden, my broker within 20 minutes got a thing that I'm a racist, and it got out of hand. And I would run for a director of the Toronto Real Estate Board that year. I was denied a seat as a director. For 3 years, I have been harassed. I get thousands of newsletters from all over the world. All kinds of things have happened. Recently, one of my posts that had nothing to do with a derogatory remark was twisted, put it on a Palestinian Facebook group, and with my phone number. Then they turned around, two people, realtors, Muslim, who turned around and opened up TikTok accounts on my name, Instagram accounts on my name, put stuff on there that I never had said. By the way, my stuff has been vetted by a judge now. I've gone to a judge. Now the police. I have had more death threats in the last couple of weeks than I've had in my entire life. And I've been in a business where I've had death threats before, but not like this. The death threats have been 3 solid weeks. And what did the police do? Nothing. I waited one day, the first day. Dispatch phones me 11 o'clock at night. Oh, we were busy. We'll be there tomorrow. Tomorrow came. Again, dispatch late at night. Sorry, we couldn't make it. Day after day, they never showed up. I'm getting death threats. I'm a tough son of a bitch. And this time I got scared and the police did nothing. And I gave up. I said, what are they going to come with? A clipboard, fill out a form and go back?
Barry, Barry, I'm so sorry you're going through this. This sounds absolutely horrible.
Where's the police?
I'll let Paul answer, but knowing that we don't really understand the full situation, Paul, if you can provide any insight to people who are in a difficult situation, a horrible situation like Barry, if they do receive anything threatening, what is the sort of process that people would best navigate this?
Sure, Joanna. So, and I think I might have missed that opportunity when I was speaking earlier, because that was one of the large messages that I presented last night to the communities. We're encouraging reporting, because if we don't have that information, we can't take action. I'll speak to Barry's situation in a second, but so we'd ask you, if you come across hate or anything suspicious or anti-Semitism or graffiti, hate motivated graffiti, please report it, encourage your staff to report it. And so we can get that information and so we can conduct those investigations. So please do that if you take anything away from today. So in Barry's case, he's a public figure. I'm sure many of you are public figures, and I'm not surprised that threat, in terms of social media, you're receiving increased threats. Many public figures are politicians, media people, anyone who really takes a position in public. We are seeing a correlation with increased threats. Again, the same message applies. I encourage you to report it. Barry, if you've had trouble reporting your incident, I would be happy to facilitate a report. I'm not aware of, it's very rare that someone calls in and generates an occurrence, and the police, there's delays and sometimes they can be several days based on priorities, but at some point the police should attend unless the call's canceled. So if that's the case where no one's attended, please, I think get in contact with Joanna, and happy to facilitate a reporting, whether it's at a local police station. That might be the easiest thing for you. And anyone else who has had trouble making a report. That's one of the things I've been doing for many years with the Jewish community, is kind of making that connection with the local division when there's some hesitancy. And oftentimes the UJA actually has approached me and said, we have a community resident who's having a little bit of trouble making a police report, or is not sure whether they should make a police report. What do you think they should do? And I'm more than happy to facilitate that reporting. I can't get you any VIP treatment in terms of how fast, but I can certainly make that connection, and we can either take the report if it's appropriate, or just provide you some safety advice. So hopefully that answers that question.
So Paul, I'm going to give you a couple more questions. There's a question of the mobile unit that is no longer at Promenade, and the reason for that.
So I would love to answer that question, but I believe that's York Region, so I would not know the answer to that. So okay. You'll have to ask one of the York Regional Police. Not
a problem. So again, any questions that aren't answered today, we will ask those questions to get those answers to you. There was also a question about what is going on university campuses, and I believe Sarah and Joanna can. Sarah?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So look, I'm sure that many of you have been following what's been taking place on campuses, not just in Canada, but around the world, frankly. And I'm sure that many of you have seen the horrific footage of the congressional hearings yesterday in the States, where if you haven't, it's all over social media, but you can Google it, where the president of Harvard, the president of MIT and UPenn were speaking. And frankly, it was probably one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen as a Jew, where they weren't, they just would do anything to basically get away from saying that they had to call out people who were calling for the genocide of Jews on campus in the States. None of them, not one of those schools, was willing to make a commitment to say that it's wrong to call for the genocide of Jews. Now, I will say in the States, at least they're putting them public, like at least they're calling it out. At least there's someone in the States that's trying to call it out. We don't have the same from our government here, and it's pretty terrifying, because if we think that the voices aren't the same on our campuses, I mean, we're wrong. It is vile what's taking place on these campuses. What are we doing about it? A number of things. So first and foremost, the most important thing for us right now, one of the very important things for us right now is that to make sure that we have good lines of communication with the university administrations. That can only go to the point where they're actually engaging with us and listening to us. You watched with the American campuses yesterday that clearly the administration is far gone. Like they are in a very different place where, I mean, if they're not going to call out people who are saying that all Jews should be cleansed from the earth, like that's an issue. Clearly. In Canada, we still have open lines of communication with some university administrations. And so we need to bolster those, and we need to make sure that we're in communication with those people to try to come out against any student groups or professors or, whatever's taking place on campus, where we could frankly work with the administration to come out against those things. I'll be honest, we're in a really difficult place until the universities are willing to stand up. And at this point, we've had some support from Rhonda Lenton at York, along with a couple other individuals across the country. But for the most part, campus is a very scary place. I'll say the students are being supported by UJA and by Hillel and by other Jewish groups on campus. The students are being given the tools that they need to be proud Jews on campus, to not hide, and to feel that they can stand strong and hold their heads high as they walk around. We also need to make sure that they're safe and secure. So we're doing that as well. The biggest issue that we're facing is the academics, the professors. The culture among them is that it is perfectly acceptable to stand up against Jewish students. And so that is an area that we need to figure out how to navigate. But we have plans in place and are working very effectively with some of the administrations, and the students have our support. But it's not easy. I'm not telling you there's a solution. It's very, very difficult. Yeah.
There's a question. Is there a similar hearing that we can assemble in Canada to confront the university?
Not right now. I mean, we're working with the administrations and we'll work with government to try to put pressure, but the system in the States is very, very different. So look, we have a meeting later today to discuss what might be possible in Canada that's similar, but our system is very, very different. And frankly, we don't have a federal government, at least, that's looking to weigh in on these things. So that's not a partisan comment. That's just what we've seen. So, it's very challenging right now. And I'll say to Officer Rinkoff, we are beyond grateful to the police, I think, and I would say this with or without him on the line. We could never imagine that the Toronto police would step up in the way that they have in York Region Police. It's been amazing, and they've helped on campuses too. But we have noticed the complete absence of some of our other political groups and government officials and campus administrations on weighing in on these things. So it's not a good situation.
So I've got a question. And again, if your question does not get answered, you can come off mute, not a problem, because I'm trying to go through all of them right now. As realtors, we often meet with complete strangers. What can we do to keep ourselves safe? Paul, I'm going to put that one to you.
Yeah, I think that's an important question, and I would say I'm going to contribute to the answer, but I'm sure, your trade obviously much much better than I do. So I'm just going to put myself in your trade for a second. And I think obviously try and know who you're meeting as much as possible in the world of quick and fast meets. Try and know who they are. But for the moment, if you don't feel safe, you might want to bring someone. You might want to go with somebody, right? You might not want to send one of your employees to do it alone. So if it's one of those things where at this moment in time you don't feel safe, then maybe this moment in time you do showings with someone else, and that just might be where we're at right now, if that makes you feel safer. Obviously, let your organization know where you have a showing, and maybe check in at the beginning and check in at the end to make sure that people know you're okay. And yeah, I think just be as public about your meetings as possible, which I know may be difficult in your business. And a lot of it also is common sense when it comes to the times of showings. Doing showings during the day perhaps rather than at night, if it's a night in a well-lit place, those types of things. So note anything suspicious, and just use good common sense. Maybe note down the license plate of the person when they meet you outside of the house, so you have a little bit of a clue if we have to work back if something undesirable happens during your meeting. But again, it's one of those things where no matter what the police do, if you don't feel safe, we have to ask you what will make you feel safe. And if it means doing showings with other individuals right now, or maybe it's the case where you might not even feel comfortable doing showings, right? So all of that's okay. But we want to make sure as a police service that you do feel safe to operate in the city. So whatever you need from us, it's important that we get that feedback. So I think that's the best way I think I can answer that question.
So
Can
we
I
have
just
time. We have time for 2 more questions. I do want to go to Patty. Did any members of Parliament come out and speak with the attendees at the rally in Ottawa on Monday? Sarah?
So yes, absolutely. We had Melissa Lanceman, who's, I think you all know, the member of Parliament at Thornhill, came and was, as was Anthony Housefather, who is a member of Parliament. He's one of the MPs in a Jewish area in Montreal, who came and spoke as well. Both Melissa and Anthony had just gotten back from a UJA trip to Israel, where they were able to tour with 3 other MPs who were with them, both at the rally and in Israel. The kibbutzim that were attacked on October 7th, and other areas. They were in 3 days of meetings in Israel, and they came and they spoke at the rally. But there were a lot of politicians there who weren't necessarily speaking, but who were there to support. And I think that that's really important. I saw Pierre. Yes, someone just wrote Pierre was in the crowd. Pierre was not speaking. Pierre was in the crowd. And honestly, I give the politicians that were in the crowd huge credit, because they weren't there to sort of get media and things like that. They were there because they were members of the community who wanted to show support. And I think that's really fabulous. There were a number of city councillors who came from Toronto, provincial politicians who came, not because they were invited to speak, but because they felt they wanted to stand with us. We do have supporters, just not enough. That's the truth. Yeah.
Okay, so we have time for 1 more question, and I do see that there was a couple more messages that were left, but they are not questions. So if anyone wants to come off for the last question, and then we will.
Can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
Regarding the arrest for the person who defecated the Starbucks store, why wasn't she charged with a hate crime, which would make it more of a deterrent for other people to do such a thing?
So the hate crime offense is actually related to the sentencing. It's a sentencing provision. So the actual offense itself, whether it's mischief, in this case it would be mischief, assault, that goes into the courts. And then it's the Crown Attorney that consents to that hate crime provision being added. And all that means is everything rolls out the same through the prosecution. But when it comes to sentencing, because it's a hate crime, the judge is supposed to take that into consideration and deal out a greater penalty. So I can't comment exactly on why that didn't happen, but as a result of the investigation, it is likely that the police consulted with the Crown Attorney earlier on in the investigation, and that because of that consultation, that hate crime provision wasn't added to the charge based on the circumstances. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't be added at a later time, and that may involve the action of the prosecutor. For example, my understanding is with the Indigo case, the hate crime provision was added at a later time. So the charges were laid, and then the hate crime charges or provision was added later. So that's what I can comment on that.
Okay, thank you very much. On behalf of Catherine, Jeremy, Darren, I just wanted to thank everybody, Joanna, Sarah, Officer Rinkoff, incredible presentation. Thank you all. I just wanted to say, before I thank everybody for being here, taking time out of your schedule, I just wanted to say that for those who aren't familiar with UJA, I think the best way of thinking about it is it's the organization that does everything. You know, as a Jewish community, we will encounter things that we are shocked about on a personal level. 2 years ago, I found out that half of the 4,000 survivors of the Holocaust living in Toronto are living at or below the poverty line. And it was one of those things where everyone would say, wow, someone should do something about this. And I approached UJA and they already had. I'm now on my 28th year of volunteering with UJA, and I'm co-chairing the Holocaust Survivors Fund. And they already saw the problem, addressed it, and are dealing with it before my involvement. My point is that when we see situations like we are seeing now, whether it's security in Toronto, assisting those in need in Israel, UJA is there at the forefront. So please help out, whether it's the annual campaign or the emergency campaign. Step up. This is the time to get involved with time or money or both. And that is it. I would like to thank everyone again for being here, and I will pass the floor back to you. Allison, should we call it to an end, or?
All right, so thank you everyone for joining us today. We will send a follow-up email with, again, we will go through the question in the chat to make sure everything was answered. And we will also send you some resources, things that Sarah's mentioned, Paula's mentioned, and Joanna's mentioned today. So really thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for all the information. Have a good day.